that's it for the steel plates. Hey, what's up friends? Welcome back to the channel. Right now I'm building my new base on the moon after leaving my facilities on Mars. Yup, I've been taking the refining and production speed seriously this time. Honestly, it's been a bit of a mess these past few months. Yes, I know it's been a while since the last video. I'm really sorry for that, guys. I'm just getting back after being sick all last month. And yes, I know it's normal for me to take a while between videos, but I'm really trying to be more active and I had a rough time recently. You know how it is. Lack of motivation, exhausted, in bed all day. In short, it's not fun. But anyway, I'm glad to be back with you all and finally be able to bring you more content. By the way, excuse my accent again, it's still my voice, but I think I sounded a bit London-esque in the last sample and the cloning still comes out kinda weird, but anyway, it's still better than the previous video. Now, to bring you up to date, after leaving Mars in the last video, the first thing I did was head for Earth's moon. I think it's the best place to launch ships and gather resources. When I arrived and found a good spot, I started building this new massive 3D printer, which I'm now going to use for the first time. As I promised in the previous video, if it had good reception, I'd bring you a new printer and here it is. It's still not the most optimal. I made a couple of mistakes, but it's quite versatile and definitely much better than the other one. As always, I used Mool, my mining ship, for the larger builds and Gary for the more subtle areas. Once I finished, I had an excellent opportunity to test it, not by building, but by recycling, which, by the way, is its second function. It so happened that one of the Legion's warships had an engagement right above my base, rendering one of the neutral mining ships cruising the sky inoperable. Without wasting any time, I headed there with the Chimera Grey and brought it back to my base. I had the ship on hold for quite some time as the printer wasn't ready yet, but I'm finally going to recycle it and wanted to show you how it works. Although it still needs some optimizations, it's definitely working. Chimera Grey almost ran out of fuel after placing the ship in the recycler, but at least it managed to complete the task. However, it won't be able to move again for a while. Now it's time to start recycling. This is going to cost me the war with this ship's faction, but I hope it doesn't have too many repercussions. Silly as it may seem, I haven't configured any action commands yet. That's what prototypes have. But anyway, we're getting started. While the recycling is underway, I wanted to take the opportunity to tell you a few things about the printer. Like why I made it this way, why there are fewer grinders, and things like that. The first thing is that unlike welders, grinders only cut the block in front of them from what I've seen, so you have to place them together for orderly recycling. If you've noticed the ones on the starting base, you may already know this. Additionally, this is why I use fewer, so as not to overload the printer too much. However, I'm planning to add more in the future so I can rebuild larger ships. Which, by the way, brings us to the next point. The purpose of this design isn't actually to recycle ships. Oddly enough, although it obviously serves that purpose, it's actually designed to rebuild them in the most automated way possible. Let's say a ship is damaged beyond repair or is so difficult that it's better to recycle it. With this system, you have the option of activating the welders on one side and the grinders on the other. This means that if you place the damaged ship on one side of the grid while it moves forward and recycles, you can simultaneously rebuild the same ship on the other side with the components you recover simply by using a projector. What's the point of this? Well, you don't have to store the entire ship you recycle in pieces in containers. This is easy with a light ship like the Chimera Grey, but definitely unthinkable with a heavily armored dreadnought. Now at this point the printer got a little stuck, so I had to back it up a bit to get it unstuck. As I said, it has some flaws yet. For example, I missed a separation block with the platform, which was a mistake on my part since it gives a gap to falling pieces and we don't want that. As you can see right here, several steel plates went underneath, but this is something we'll fix later, so don't worry. By the way, before anyone mentions in the comments that nanobots are the best way to rebuild ships, I want to clarify that the purpose of this is to achieve optimal building methods in vanilla without mods. I'm referring to things that make progress easier on any random server you join. Although for now it is only a test environment, of course. After this, I attached a couple of magnetic plates to Mule and used them to collect and recycle the remaining fragments. This won't be necessary once the entire structure is finished, but for now we're gonna clean with this. Okay, and with that, we're done with the recycling part, or almost. There are still a lot of pieces left behind. If we want to prevent this in the future, I really have to increase the printer size, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'll just clean up this mess, and then we move on to the next thing. Just 1 minute, please. Okay, that's it. Oh, just a minute. There are a couple more pieces left over here. Well, now it's done. I think I already have everything I need to make a good vehicle capable of harvesting ice. I just need to figure out where to start. Alright, the containers. I need to increase the size of the reserves first. With what we got from the ship, there will be plenty of materials to finish this, so it shouldn't take long. Just a second. Well, mission accomplished. I know it might seem silly to have done it by hand instead of using Gary, but they're right next to each other, so it's definitely faster this time. Now that we have a stockpile, it's time to work on the rover. And here we are at last. Now we're entering uncharted territory again for me, so I certainly took my time on this part. Now we're going to build a printer for small vehicles. While I already have the large block printer under control, I had some unpleasant surprises with this one. So for this part, we'll need to build a somewhat complex structure indoors, so our friend will be very helpful here. Gary, please come here. Now's your time to shine. You didn't think I was going to leave him out, did you?
Hello, Master. Do you have some work for me today?
Of course, bro. Now I need some help setting up that thing back there, so let's get to work. With the frame in place, we use the build planner to manually load the parts into Gary, and then we build the small printer using him.
Sir, I'm feeling a little heavy now. I don't think I can handle much more weight.
Don't worry, buddy. We'll make the trips in parts so we don't burden you too much.
It means you should go on a diet or get your fat ass off him.
Oh, come on. You couldn't stay quiet through the whole video, right?
I love you too, sweetie. Don't worry.
Screw you. Anyway, as I was saying, this was my first attempt at a 3D printer for small vehicles. Using Gary, I was able to complete it with just 2 charges. I have to say, the value that small construction vehicles bring may seem insignificant to many, but seriously friends, having this is like having an inventory 15 times larger, and it practically doesn't limit your mobility. Even for large builds like the turtle shell, I save a ton of time by building areas that are difficult for Mule to access, like the lower batteries and wheels. By the way, I just remembered I haven't shown you that yet. I'll do later. It's my mining vehicle. Next, I added a hinge to hold the small projector and display the hologram of the first car of our next rover. So far all good, all nice, but things would get a little more complicated after this. Once the projector was finished and the projection positioned, which took a while because projections always appear however they please, I decided it was time to connect the printer to the conveyor system. Once again, Gary was incredibly helpful with his agility in building structures without much movement or effort, all in one trip and with plenty of material left over. Of course, I placed the frames manually first and installed the first ones with what I had in stock to save time. Then I went up to the roof with Gary with the preloaded containers and we completed the connections in a few seconds, placed the control panel near the printer and proceeded to move the welder rack. This is where we ran into the first problem. After finishing the control panel and giving it a final inspection, I certainly felt pretty confident at first, but the thing was, I overestimated the range of the welders too much. I thought they could be placed at the same distance as the large block ones, but it turned out not to be. When I tried to start printing the truck's tractor, it wouldn't even start welding because the welders were out of range of the base blocks. While for large blocks you could effectively cover a total of 26 blocks with a single welder, when it comes to small blocks, the welder's range sphere doesn't reach them. That's right, the soldering iron's range turns out to be spherical, not square as I initially thought. Therefore, I had to completely redesign the printer, and with this, we solved the first of our problems. After the modifications, this is how it turned out. Thicker, heavier on PCU, but at least it doesn't need to be as large, since it's for small vehicles after all. So, with the problem solved, we turned on the welders and began assembling the tractor. Some components, like the wheels and propulsion wings, were left out of the grill, so I had to assemble them by hand. But I'll do the most tedious parts off camera so I don't bore you. To kill time while the welding was completed, because every layer certainly takes its time, I decided to go on a resource extraction trip with the turtle shell. Yep, that's what I was talking about. When I began operations on the Mon, I learned that a medium-sized mining vessel like Mool with a single large cargo container wouldn't be sufficient to build a proper base. Therefore, I decided a larger vehicle was necessary, something that would save me time and a lot of travel. That's when I began designing this in creative mode. Once the hull was finished, it wasn't too difficult to build it on this world using Gary and Mool. The only tedious part was the drills, which I had to modify several times. Originally, it was supposed to work for deep and surface excavation, but after several problems with the drill, I decided to use it only for extracting surface rock. Such a quantity of cargo is nothing to sneeze at anyway. This vehicle has 10 large containers on board, totaling over 100,000 tons of rock, enough to carry large-scale construction projects on each trip. So to get minerals for specific ship components like gold or platinum, I use Gary. Mule is for construction and some medium loads of magnesium and uranium, and the turtle shell for heavy loads of basic minerals. Being on the moon, it's much easier to operate these types of vehicles. Keep in mind that if we were on Earth, such an amount of cargo would be a real problem. Here on the moon, when the 100,000 tons of rock are loaded, the vehicle has trouble moving with agility, even in this gravity, which is why I installed the rocket boosters you can see on the back. They're really useful for getting out of potholes, whether they're from meteorites or the ones left behind by excavations. This detail is another big problem, by the way, which is why we go so far from the base to drill. Recently, I've been considering starting to build roads for some operations due to the tremendous difficulty of reaching the extraction areas on some occasions. In this case, we're on a plane, so the problem is lesser. However, there are areas that are truly difficult for ground vehicles to access, such as the ice beds on the moon. To be honest, this is something I didn't initially count on. I always underestimated the importance of ice. and the new vehicle I'm building is precisely for reaching those regions by land. The extraction process takes some time. We can move faster without damaging the conveyors or even the drills due to friction with the ground, so we do it slowly and calmly while the tanks slowly fill. I certainly had a problem here. I got too close to the previous excavation, so to avoid the risk of overfilling the tank and not being able to get out, I decided to simply continue past the pothole. From here, it's safe to mine without getting stuck. I just have to go slowly to avoid damaging the drill. Always keep below 1 meter per second and the tank will fill in just over a minute. By the way, also something worth noting is that the vehicle has 2 refineries mounted on top, so it can compact and process resources as it extracts them. This doesn't increase efficiency too much since it mines much faster than it processes, but it helps deliver more ore to the base with each trip. Plus, the longer the trip takes, the more compact and lighter the load becomes. You know, looking back, I think I'm coming up with a very interesting conspiracy theory about the Nazca lines. Nah, don't listen to me, it's the idiot in my head talking.
The idiot in your head? Oh honey, you should introduce me to the smart guy someday. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him yet, and that's saying something because I've been with you since the beginning of this series.
Yeah, you're right, Sarah. The idiot is definitely the one in charge most of the time. Otherwise, I really can't explain how I came up with the idea of creating you.
Probably because without me, Alive's lore would be garbage.
Seriously, you're running a system reboot. Spoiler alert. Once the tanks are full, we retract the drill again. This takes a few seconds, and then we head back to base. This is where we really have to drive carefully to prevent incidents. If the rover gets stuck now, it would be very difficult to recover. Once in the base, we dock with the connector and all the refineries will immediately begin processing the rock. It certainly takes them very little time since there are many of them and they all have speed modules. With this, we already have enough minerals to finish our truck. However, here we would face our second and thankfully final problem with the printer. First of all, we took it out of the garage and installed the parts that were out of range of the printer. This took me quite a while, not only because of the build, but because I had to investigate a crash drone that got too close to my base and the executor's cannons shot it down. I removed that entire section in the edit because I don't want the video to be 5 hours long, but while I was returning, one of the Legion ships flew over my base and I wanted to show you just that part because it was so cool. The creator of this mod really put his all into it. I love those capital ships that zip through space all the time. For now, although the executor may be able to take one on, I won't risk it in combat until I have the means to rebuild it if I lose it. Just look at that thing, it's a monster. It'll definitely put up an interesting fight when we face it. But well, all in due time. So, back to the point. The first thing I did was finish the tractor thrusters and test it, which was pretty simple. I just had to set up a projector, load all the components into Mule, and I finished it pretty quickly. We end the test and then move on to the wagons, of which I initially only planned to put 2 for testing, but this is where the problem came in. When I uploaded the schematic for the first car, I found that the welder rack was too low to fit it with the wheels on. This was incredibly frustrating because I only had 2 options: either disassemble the entire printer to reposition it higher, or use Mule to lift it and reposition it with a connecting block. Obviously, I wasn't going to disassemble the entire thing to rebuild it from scratch. It's always frustrated me to restart a task I'd already worked on from the beginning, so the second option would be the way to go. Without further thought, we grabbed Mule and used him as a crane to lift the printer. Although this is very tedious and requires great care, it's definitely better than rebuilding the entire damn structure from scratch. After repositioning it, we also had to extend the printer a bit and remove the side wall of the garage because the cars turned out to be much larger than I remembered. From here on out, there wouldn't be many more complications. Only the tow hooks would have to be attached by hand because they are substructures. Meanwhile, I made a few mining trips in the turtle shell to keep the tanks full during construction, returning periodically to move the printer. Although much of the task was automated, don't expect a time-lapse like the one I did with the executor, because it's certainly very difficult to do. You have to keep the containers full, operate the printer slowly, constantly check for missing blocks, and that makes it very difficult to record smooth footage with a steady camera. So this time I didn't focus on recording the entire construction of the cars. By now, I must have skipped about 2 hours of footage. I would have liked to show more, but there's still a lot missing and I don't want to go over half an hour. Although I think I'll do it anyway. Keep in mind that my plans for this video were to secure fuel reserves, and I already think I'll have to split it into 2 parts. So, after finishing the second car, I attached a temporary control seat and rolled it to the tractor. Something to note is that although these cars are made from small blocks, they have much more space than large cargo containers, and they make much better use of it. While a large cargo container can hold 421,000 liters, one of these can hold more than 500,000. Sorry for not remembering the exact figure. I had it calculated, but remember that I'm editing this a month after recording it. After attaching the second container, we would make another car which would have less than half the carrying capacity and an extendable drill on top. This car would have many substructures, so the printer's assistance would be limited since, as you know, you can't project substructures onto construction holograms. So to make it a little easier, I built the base structure under the printer and placed the substructure frames one by one while the printer automatically welded them together. This way, it was almost like doing it in creative mode. Although I had to place the drills outside the garage because they wouldn't fit under the printer. But anyway, that was a minor problem. There were only about 9 drills since the other 18 were outside the welder line. Before connecting it, I configured the mechanical arm. This part I did it off camera, not even cut it in the editing. I simply didn't record it because it took quite a while and is by far the most tedious thing there is. Once finished, we connected it to the end of the truck and we were ready to head out into the great lunar ice fields. Once everything was ready, this is how the truck came together, a complete space engineer style tanker. Because ice is like fuel, no. Well, not exactly. It almost looks more like a train now that I look at it this way, and it will become even more so when I add more cars. Anyway, time to begin our journey. The ice beds are very far away, so it will take us a while to get there, but if we're lucky, the trip will go smoothly. Well, for starters it's going great. We'll see if it maintains the performance when we reach our goal. So far everything was fine, but the fun part comes now, guys. I don't want to give you any spoilers, so see this for yourself. Guys, I don't think even the truck knew it could do that. And the funniest thing is that this is just getting started. Throughout the entire journey, we encountered a ton of uneven terrain like mountains, peaks, rocks, and the truck overcame almost every one of them without difficulty, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. Despite what it may seem, and this is something I saw coming to some extent, this vehicle is still far from being perfect. Well, at least when it comes to the task for which it was designed. These clips I showed you were the most difficult parts of the outbound journey, and the vehicle overcame them with ease. However, there were times when I got stuck in the stupidest way possible. There was one time when I fell into a hole, another time when I got stuck on a peak barely 2 meters high because the wheels were off the ground. And this led me in some cases to be forced to upgrade the tractor and even the wagons. The additional propulsion and gyroscopes allowed me to overcome obstacles and make significant progress on the course. And although I successfully reached the ice belts, things got much more complicated from here on out. When I only slightly filled the ice tanks, the hill stopped being a challenge and turned into a living hell. I arrived here and positioned myself so the truck could move freely. Then I extended the drill and extracted some ice. The drilling worked incredibly well, but I only extracted a small portion to avoid being overweight. Yep, positioning myself was a bit tricky, so it took me a couple of seconds, but as soon as the drill was on a patch of ice, I applied the brakes and stopped as close as I could. Well, To make my life easier, I left the drill control. Oops, I forgot to close my helmet. Okay, it's fixed. Now, as I was saying, I left the drill controls on the drill carriage so I could see it up close and not overload the cockpit controls. So let's go outside. I really love how it works. For a small block machine, it's much more efficient than the turtle shell drill. And with the depth it can reach, I think a single hole will be enough to fill the truck right now. But as I mentioned, we won't be focusing on filling the truck, but rather seeing how strong it is in terrain like this. Although I could have gotten more, it was already starting to feel a little heavy, so I decided to just scratch the surface and stop mining here, since the biggest problems would come on the return trip. Well, it was a fun trip so far, guys, but we're already over 30 minutes into the video, so for now, I will leave it at this point. Remember to leave me a like if you're enjoying the content, and subscribe to see how I got out of the ice fields, which honestly was busier than you'd imagine. So I'll leave that for the second part. See you soon, brothers.